Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning after Dreamfest. Who actually went to the concert last night? All right, that's pretty impressive. I was expecting there to be basically 3 people in the room, so it's nice to see everyone. So I think we're gonna have some fun today. We're gonna learn a little bit about React Native and how we can use React Native to build Salesforce mobile apps. So my name is Joe Ferraro. I work for a company called Mavens. We do 100% of our business in the healthcare and life sciences industry. So we started with Salesforce. We started doing some Heroku stuff. Now we do AWS solutions. So just kind of a broad-based cloud consulting company focused in healthcare and life sciences. And a lot of the work that we do is actually putting into use some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, building mobile apps for patients, building mobile apps for doctors, et cetera. Okay, so how are we going to do this? So I guess this session is about React Native, but I want to start by sort of talking about the current status of Salesforce mobile app development for you, the developer, in 2017. So if I want to sit down and build a mobile app that integrates with Salesforce, what are my options today in 2017? And then we'll transition to a discussion of React Native in more depth. So we'll start with an overview of what the technology is, who's using it, how you can use it, and then we'll do a quick start, or at least show you what a quick start looks like with React Native. And then we're going to transition to something a little bit more interesting. So what would it be like to build a e-commerce application for an e-commerce giant like my fictitious company, Mosaic? And we'll talk about the toolbox that you have at your disposal when you're building, or we think, an opinionated toolbox for building an app in React Native that integrates with Salesforce. We'll look at some code, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. Hopefully, we can leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end, and then obviously I'll stay after if you guys have any additional questions. And if you do have questions at the end, definitely try to go up to the microphone so that the recording can hear it. Otherwise, I'll just have to repeat the question for you guys. Okay, so before we get started even on any of this, who here is using React or React Native today? Fantastic. Who here is an iOS developer, an Android developer? Okay. So it's a mix in the room, which is good. And I forgot to mention, so this is the repository for one of the projects I'm going to talk about today. If you guys want to screenshot that and download the code. Oh, let me leave it up a little bit longer for you guys. And also, I am battling a little bit of a cold, so I'll try not to cough into the mic too much. But I can't promise anything. Okay, so let's talk about the world of Salesforce mobile app development. As you guys know, there's been a pretty big announcement this week about Salesforce mobile app development. You kind of have 3 different options when you're building mobile Salesforce apps. So today you have Salesforce One, and this is a really great approach for you if you need to provide a mobile experience to internal users, employees. You can build custom interfaces and roll those out to your users. What's nice about it, it's productized, cross-platform. You don't have to worry about certificates or mobile deployments. That sort of stuff is handled for you. And we also have a new capability in the marketplace now, My Salesforce. I'm not going to talk too much about My Salesforce today. I'll let them talk about that because obviously there's a lot of sessions dedicated to it. But that's sort of the productized route. And then if you want to go the pure web route, you can do a responsive web application. So you can maybe use communities, use one of the responsive communities templates, and roll out an application that works across devices using web technologies. And then last but not least is the native approach. So with the responsive web approach, you have some limitations. So you don't have access to all of the device APIs, some of the nice security features or fancy animations you want to do, or just lower level device APIs that you would want to have access to. You might not in the responsive approach, but you'll have that in the native approach. So this is nice for applications that need a little bit more sophistication and user experience, or you want just a more granular level of control over your application. Okay, so even within custom, you have a couple different options. So who here is using the mobile SDK today? Salesforce mobile SDK? Not many of you. So you can go with the Salesforce mobile SDK. This is a really nice approach if you don't want to have to be rewriting all the Salesforce integrations over and over again, they have some nice security features, some offline sync capabilities. This is a great approach if you want to go in that direction. You don't want to have to rebuild all that stuff every time you're building a mobile app. And then you can also just go straight to the metal and build custom. And so the focus today is going to be on that route. So I'm not going to talk about any of the other stuff. All valid approaches, we're just going to focus on custom. And even within custom, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take. You can use a hybrid framework like a PhoneGap. You can write native code, Java, Objective-C, Swift. Or you can use some of the more modern frameworks for building native applications like React Native, which is our focus today. All right, so what is React Native? So this is an open source project from Facebook. It's been around for a couple of years now. And it's really a framework for building native mobile apps. And I'm not going to get too deep into the technical details of how this is implemented, but the idea here is you can write cross-platform code, you can share a lot of code. In our experience, you can share a significant amount of code between the platforms, Android and iOS. And you can actually achieve native performance if you write the application the right way. So the way it's architected, it's passing information over a bridge. And as long as you're managing the application correctly in terms of your memory and your views, you can actually have native performance. And they're rendering real native components on the platform side or on the native side, so everything looks and feels like a native app as well. So if it's written the right way, you would never know you're actually running a React Native app. And what's nice about it also is it's used in production by some large companies. So I'll just throw some logos up there for different apps that are using it. Obviously, Facebook has been using it for a while now for their own applications. SoundCloud, Skype, Airbnb, Walmart, Uber, and I think Instagram is probably one of the most famous ones. They're using that as a case study in a lot of different articles that I've seen recently. So you're standing on the shoulders of giants. It's a very active open source community, so it's a really good choice if you want to go this route. So how do you get started with a React Native application? There's really a few different commands that you can run, and they've actually made a lot of progress over the last, I would say, 8 months with this part of getting up and running with React Native, because it was a little bit daunting at first. But they've made it much more straightforward and give you a couple of commands that you can run if you want to just build a simple app that doesn't really have any native integrations. And then they also have kind of the advanced route as well that gets you bootstrapped with an app that's got more granular level control and the ability to bridge to native modules, et cetera. So you're going to first start by installing the React Native CLI. So if you have npm installed, as you should, npm install global React Native CLI. Then you're going to initiate a project. So call it Hello Dreamforce. What this will do is ask you, it'll go through a number of prompts and ask you what you want to name your project, where you want to target, et cetera. And it'll bootstrap your project and put it on the disk, CD into that directory, and then React Native run iOS. What this does, it's actually going to compile your application, or run Android if you're writing an Android app. It'll compile your application, and then it will display your application in the simulator. So technically, you never have to go into Xcode if you want to do some really basic stuff. Some people don't like Xcode, so I throw that in. That will do everything in the command line, in your terminal, and build the application and run it within your simulator. So what I want to do is just start with a really, really simple application, because it sounds like there's some folks that are really new to this, that is essentially going to throw up an OAuth screen, allow you to log in, and then redirect you back with some information that you can then use to query Salesforce. But before I do that, let's just walk through the Salesforce setup for something like this. And so what we're going to work our way up to is a more sophisticated app, as I mentioned. That's an e-commerce application that's going to give you a very basic e-commerce platform that I've built custom with a few custom objects. And it's all going to start with communities. So I want to expose some capability to my community's users, whether they're partners, vendors, whatever. We're going to focus on customers today. And so I'd go in and I'd create a connected app. Well, I guess I would enable communities first and create my community. There's not a whole lot going on in my community. I've basically just put the standard user interface in front of it, and I've enabled one of my profiles, which I'll go through here in a second, to be able to use the community. Because I'm not focused on the web side right now. You got a whole host of technologies and capabilities that you can use within communities in the communities builder if you want to focus on web. I just need the ability to authenticate a communities user today using a client ID, which is what we're going to get to here now. So after I create my community, I'm going to go ahead and create my connected app. Who here has created a connected app before? Okay. So when you create a connected app, and actually I got to go over to the other app. Here we go. So when you create a connected app, you're going to get some OAuth information returned to you, generated automatically. So we're going to use this OAuth information, the consumer key specifically, and the URL for our community to allow our user to log in. So if you remember, here was our URL for community, and then we have here the consumer key. And those are the two pieces of information that we're going to use in the really, really basic, simple OAuth setup in our really super simple React app. Okay, so let's switch over to some code. That's okay, I don't need to back that up. So let me go over to the desktop. And I'll just go ahead and clone this basic application that you guys have access to. I'll put it on my desktop, hello Dreamforce. I'm going to CD into it. Now, I am going to install the dependencies here, which hopefully won't take too long. And while I'm doing that, let me open code so you guys can see what that actually looks like. Okay, so here's my Hello Dreamforce app. And in the background, let me actually also run this. Run iOS. I got my simulator here, put that over there. Okay, so let's go through some code for the basic app. So this is just an application that's using plain JavaScript. We're going to talk about TypeScript here in a few minutes. So sort of the entry point for my application is app.js. And it's a pretty simple little class here that we've created that extends a component, React component. And so this right here is kind of where the focus should be here to start, lines 35 through 42. Really all we're doing is we're saying, all right, we have a view in the application, and if the state of my component at any given time is logged in, then I want to show the home screen. If I'm not logged in, then I want to show the login screen. So what does the login screen look like? So this is the login screen. So I've got this directory of screens. And again, it's pretty simple. I've got a view that's wrapping a web view. And the source of that web view is going to be the URL of my OAuth login for my community. And I'm creating that URL by taking my authorization URL based on the community URL that I have in the community configuration, saying I want a token at the end of this, passing a client ID from my connected app, and then specifying a callback here as well. So the callback, I've created a URL scheme in my app called df17. And when I go back to app, I'll show you how we actually captured this callback. And we're looking for df17 sfdc auth done. So when OAuth redirects back to that URL, the application picks it up on the device and we can extract the login information for the user. It's pretty straightforward if you've done an OAuth implementation before. So that's that auth URL that gets passed. Back in app, because we really only have 3 modules here. We have app, we have home, and we have login. So back in app, which is kind of the top level root view, you can see that we're adding an event listener. And that event listener is looking for that callback from Salesforce. And we can pass that handle OAuth callback, and extract the login info. So it's going to be a long string of information that we've got to extract out. And then on lines 28 and 29, we can use a standard capability here with React Native, async storage, to actually set our instance URL and access token. So that'll be there, and it will persist with the application through stops and starts. And then once we've done that, we can now say that I am logged in. And at that point, the application will automatically re-render, because that's the way React works, is if a state changes or props change in my component, then a re-render will occur, and it'll know that I'm logged in now, and I'll get the home screen. All right. So in the background, while I was talking through that, it was compiling and building my app. And so here's the app here. This is the OAuth screen that I've set up in Salesforce. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. Hopefully that's the right one. Standard OAuth confirmation here that mobile app is asking for this information. And then I log in, and it happened quickly, but the redirect occurred, and the application picked up the redirect to DF17 and showed the home screen. And I'll show you what the home screen here looks like. It's very fancy, as you can see. So let me get this over here for a second. So this is the home screen. So we've got a view. We've got some text that says, hey, you're logged in. We've got the instance URL here, and we extract that instance URL and access token from async storage here in lines 18 and 19. And that's the basic app. So from here, once you have your access token, your instance URL, and all the other information, I'm only throwing a couple pieces of information that we get, then you can go and query Salesforce. You can query the user info endpoint to get more information about your user, their profile photo, what have you. Your access token you can then use to go and make REST API calls and do whatever you need to do. All right, so that was the basic option. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So let's go back here, and let's talk about what it might look like to do a more advanced implementation. Where did I put my clicker? Here we go. OK, so what we're going to build, and we're going to do it quickly, obviously. So I have a fictitious company called Mosaic. This is the e-commerce giant that's competing with Amazon now. So they have a shopping app, and they're also using Salesforce Community Cloud, and they have Service Cloud. And they want to pilot running their massive application on Salesforce integrated with Service Cloud. So we'll take a look at a shopping app. Got online ordering, payment processing, customer support, push notifications, and over-the-air updates. So what do we have? What's in our toolbox? So from a source code perspective, I really like to use TypeScript. Anybody here use TypeScript? OK. It's a really nice, and I'll go through each one of these. It's a really nice way for you to maintain code quality as you are building a more and more sophisticated app. For state management, we're going to use Redux. Routing and navigation, React Navigation. For push notifications, we're going to use Firebase Cloud Messaging. And for code updates, we're going to use Microsoft Codebush. I'll leave this up here for a second. I'm going to drill into each one of these. So this is sort of our toolbox. And obviously, for each one of these sections, you can kind of replace this with whatever you're comfortable with, but this is kind of what you need. All right, so what's TypeScript? TypeScript is a language from Microsoft, open source project, compiles down to JavaScript. So it's a superset of JavaScript. And it's object-oriented. So people that come from languages that are more strongly typed, and they first start using plain JavaScript, they're like, I can't do this. And so I imagine that was the impetus for TypeScript. It's like, okay, I gotta put some rigor around my development process and my coding. So it's really nice, gives you static type checking. A lot of times, browsers will lag behind in support for things like ES6 and ES7 features, and TypeScript's ahead of the curve on a lot of that stuff. So it's really great if you want to use those latest and greatest features. And because it's Microsoft, you get IntelliSense as well. So who here uses Visual Studio Code? Okay, so it's really great experience in code using writing TypeScript. Microsoft does a really good job. So for state management, we're going to use Redux. So who here has written an Angular application before, Angular 1? Did you ever have issues with two-way data binding and not really understanding where state propagation was happening within the application, not sure which component was prompting that update? That's kind of what it looks like on the left side. And Redux is really a state container. That's all it does. It's pretty simple if you think about the concept. The implementation is more complicated. It's just a way for you to maintain state for your JavaScript application. So it's backed by a single store for your application, so you can see that on the right side, where a store is actually informing every component in the application. And that store is just a plain JavaScript object. So everything that the app knows about anything is just contained in a single plain JavaScript object. And it's backed by this idea that state should be flowing one direction to your components and not basically what you see on the left side, where state is being mutated in a lot of different areas in the application. So with Redux, state is read-only, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but a component can't just mutate state. It has to inform the application that it intends to mutate state, and Redux will figure out whether, first of all, it's allowed, and second of all, how to go about doing that. So a component will emit an action saying, I intend to refresh some data from the server, and that action layer will handle the rest. And the idea here is it encourages immutability in your programming. Again, that's a deeper topic, but these are just sort of the core principles of Redux. Now my clicker's not working. There we go. So for navigation, there's a host of, well, actually I shouldn't say a host. There's probably like 5 to 10 navigation libraries right now in the open source community for React. It's a space that's moving quickly because there's this delicate trade-off between wanting sort of native performance in the transitions and things like that, and it's a more complicated topic because people also are trying to support navigation not only in React Native but also React on the web. React Navigation is the open source project that now Facebook is recommending in their own documentation, so that's the one that we'll use here. So it is nice, gives you declarative navigation for React, and I'll show you a little bit how that's declared. You got a number of different paradigms that you can implement, so stacks, tabs or drawers, which I'm sure you've all seen in mobile apps. You can configure those transitions, so if you want your screen to wipe up from the bottom, you can do that. If you want it to be a modal, etc. Cross-platform, and it's got integration with Redux as well. So an example might be, I have a Redux action that logs the user out. Well, that Redux action could log the user out, but then also fire another Redux action that might change the state of the navigation at any given time, maybe log them out and take them to a home screen. Firebase Cloud Messaging. So this is a cross-platform messaging solution. It's totally free, which blows my mind a little bit. You can send millions of transactions a day or messages. It's free. Gives you a RESTful interface for sending those push notifications. Gives you the ability to do some pretty robust segmentation. So if I want to segment a certain type of user that's subscribed to a specific channel, I can do that pretty easily based on users, devices, topics, apps they're running, et cetera. So it's really nice. And then finally, Microsoft Codebush. So this is a cloud-based OTA update solution that allows you to quickly fix a bug and roll that out to your users without having to go back through app security review. This is another Microsoft-sponsored project, another one that's free today. There will be a paid level at some point. We're in release mode right now, or they are. But there should be a free tier if you're just rolling out a few updates a month to your apps. And right now that they have extensions for React Native in Cordova. All right, so let's go back and see some code. All right. So this is the more robust application, Dreamforce 2017. And this is where I want to take you through a couple of the objects as well. So I'd mentioned that I built like a very, very, very basic e-commerce platform that is not competing whatsoever with Commerce Cloud. Just to give you guys the kind of the idea. So we've got orders with order lines. We've got some products here that basically are, have a product name, a manufacturer, a price, and a photo. And then we have our user here, so Joseph Ferraro, my community's user, who is registered with Mosaic. So let's go ahead and get that app started up. Okay, so here's my application. I'll go ahead and log out here. So here's my Mosaic application. So I'm going to go ahead and log into the app. So again, a simple or a similar process for the simple app. Go ahead and do this. Okay, I'll confirm. All right, so the first thing you'll notice is we've got some additional UI elements. It's not the prettiest application, but we've got some stuff. So the first thing you'll notice here is a list of products. So I've got a list of products here that I can pull down to refresh. You've seen that concept in a lot of different mobile apps. And each one of these products is being served from Salesforce from that product table. So I'm just doing a query of those products, I'm putting those into state, in Redux state, and then when I'm refreshing or pulling down to refresh, essentially what I'm doing is in the action layer for Redux, I'm going in and calling out to the API, getting those products back, and putting them back into state. And I'll walk through sort of the details of that little flow here in a second. I've got a tab here for support, I've got a tab here for orders, and then I've got my account tab here with my avatar here that I haven't updated. Okay, so what can this app do? So I can go in and drill into a specific product, and each one of these tabs is really a stack navigator that's embedded within a tab navigator. So you've seen the concept of being able to go to a tab and then drill really deep into that specific tab and then go to a different tab and then go back to that tab and it's drilled in. You've navigated 5 deep potentially. So the idea here is that you can be creative with the way that you're nesting and architecting your navigations using React Navigator or React Navigation. So let's say I want to purchase this thing. I'll go ahead and add it to my cart. And when I add it to my cart, what I'm doing, again, is I'm firing a Redux action that is placing something in a temporary store that I have called the cart. And I have a little notifier here that says I got an item in my cart. I can progress here to the ability to submit my order. And I'll go ahead and do that. OK, my order is confirmed. Great. And you'll see here that now in the Orders tab, I've got an order here that I've placed. So what happened was when we submitted the order, not only did we submit the order to Salesforce, we also retrieved the latest orders and then updated our Redux store that we have that's paying attention to orders. And that's being displayed on the screen. OK, so that was a little walkthrough of a little bit of the navigation capability that you have, and also the integration with Salesforce that we have. So you can see we have an order that we created here for the Nintendo Switch. It's been submitted, and I have my order line there as well. So let's talk a little about push notifications. So one of the use cases might be, all right, when some integration occurs in my Salesforce environment and I get some information back on tracking or the shipment status, the status might get set to shipped. So I have a little trigger that I'm running on orders that says when the order is set to shipped, let's send out a push notification to the user. So we'll go ahead and do that now. And you can see I get a push notification, your order has shipped. So what's nice about this is the code to do that within Salesforce is really straightforward. So I mentioned before that with Firebase Cloud Messaging, it's a RESTful interface. I can just send over my server key, which is in the configuration in my Firebase console, and I can pass a couple different parameters, but I can send to a specific topic, and this particular topic, this user, when they run the app, is subscribed to a topic with their Salesforce user ID. So we say, hey, send a push notification to that Salesforce user ID, and here's the content of it. So it's very, very straightforward for us to be able to do that with Firebase Cloud Messaging. All right, so I've got a few minutes left. So let's talk about Codebush a little bit. And so one of the things you might want to do when you're running a mobile application is, especially a shopping application, for example, is you might want to, I don't know, run a new promo. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do that from a visual standpoint, but I'm going to kind of go the basic route here. And I just want to add a modal notification that a promo is occurring, okay? So how would I go about doing that with Codebush? So in my tab view, and I'll go over there now. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. You can see that I've got all my tabs lined up here. So we sort of walk through how each one of your tabs is its own stack, and then you can nest those stacks within a tab nav. And I have my tab component. So what I want to do here is I have a component in my application called promo modal. And so what I'll do is I'll just add that component to the tab nav. And I'll go ahead and save that. And that'll compile. And then over in my terminal, and what's nice about Codebush is everything is terminal enabled. So it's got its own command line tool, so everything can be looped into your continuous integration process. So for apps that we're building, we have a whole continuous integration process that says, okay, obviously when you make the change to the React app, you're going to build the React app, you're going to run its tests, and then you're going to, via continuous integration, push out an update to the application. So in my terminal here, I have a script called Codebush. And what it does, it uses the Codebush command line tool. Codebush, release React, the name of the application, the target, where it's iOS, and then a bunch of other configuration that you can apply to that update as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run that now. It's going to give me some errors because I don't have everything typed in TypeScript. But it's going to go through the process of building the application and then releasing it. We'll just let that do its thing. Okay, so you can see here at the bottom, they had some upload progress, releasing update contents to Codebush, and then the application bundle is now in Codebush for your users to pick up. So I'll go ahead and switch over to my phone. And there's my new component that I added to the tab view that is now being released to my users that are subscribed to this particular app. So it's very, very simple to make those changes. Now, the one caveat is if you're going to make changes to native code, so if you're going to add a new native module or you need to change entitlements for your certificate or something like that, you got to go back through the security review, back through the App Store. This is for incremental changes, and actually it says in the Codebush documentation and FAQ that you can't materially change the functionality of your application. That's not the intent, and actually also could violate your terms of service with Apple and Google. So, okay. So went through a couple of different demos there. And kind of just want to circle back and just visually, because I am a visual person, kind of walk through a couple of these concepts. So for routing and navigation, you have this root component in React. And we had those initial views, a welcome, login, and then we had a tab view. The tab had a number of different stacks that were nested inside. So we have cases, orders, products, and actually there's one more for account. And then for cases, you're going to have a number of different views then also that are nested within those. So if you have a list of cases, you want to create a new case or a case detail, those views are nested in as well. So you can get, again, very, very creative in terms of the way you're nesting your views and configuring your views and the way that you're transitioning between them. And then from a Redux perspective, I find this helpful for people that are still trying to understand what Redux does, to look at what a server request looks like with Redux. So if you remember, we had this component that had a list of products, and I pulled down on it. So what happens is that component actually fires an event to the action layer. So it actually calls a function, an action function. In this case, it might be called getProducts. And the action layer is where it needs to determine what it can do with that action, what it should do. And this is where you might do, again, integration with an external API or third party. So that action will call out to Salesforce. And then it'll fire another action. And these actions all have names, so you understand how to handle them. And when Salesforce returns those products back, as an example, that action layer will then fire a getProductSuccess action, as an example. And then in the store, you have a number of reducers. They're called reducers, these functions that basically look for these actions. They're subscribed to these actions. And if it's an action that they are subscribed to, they will update their own state. So for getProductSuccess, they're looking for that action. And then they might pluck out the products that were associated with that action and then update the store. And then finally, because the store has been updated and the component is subscribed to the store, the component will update itself or re-render automatically. And that's the way React works. So that ensures that you are not mutating state from components or mutating state between components, and that everything is encapsulated within that action layer and the Redux store. Real quick, on the push notification side, so you basically have three entities. You've got Salesforce that is sending an HTTP request out to Firebase, and then Firebase is delivering that message based on the topic, they call it a topic or channel, that you are directing that message to, and that'll be delivered to the device. And then last but not least, it was a little bit hard to read the terminal window there, but when I want to push an update with Codebush, I can use Codebush app add Dreamforce 17, so that'll actually add the app to Codebush. Then I can see the history of my deployments with Codebush deployment history. And then that third command there is, how do I actually push that update? Codebush release React, the name of my app, the platform that I'm targeting, the deployment name, so you could have production, staging, et cetera, and then description of your change. All right? So a couple things we didn't talk about. Security. So there's a lot of capability that you can add in around Touch ID and Face ID lock for your application, encrypting data at rest. Certificate pinning. I also didn't show you collaboration with Chatter. So if you are running a Service Cloud instance and you want to use Chatter to collaborate with your customers, and then even going as far as implementing live message into your application as well. All right, thank you so much. Any questions? I know I went a little bit long. Yes, do you mind coming up here?
Thanks for the demo.
Yep.
I was wondering what your thoughts were about the Salesforce SDK React Native plugin or their toolset for this, because you didn't use any of the Salesforce SDK mobile SDK toolset.
Right. So I think my thoughts on it are, I like to get a little bit, I want to understand what's happening. And I feel like with this Salesforce SDK, sometimes there's a little too much going on. There's some stuff that I don't necessarily need. And it can bloat your app. So it definitely has its capabilities and it has its place. I like to go a little bit lighter weight with it and just hit the REST APIs directly and write it sort of from the ground up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes.
So you've showed React Native. Actually, I have a React app that is desktop and responsive.
Yep.
What would be the recommended way to port it to mobile?
Great question. So there is a project out there called React Native Web. Last time I checked, it was not really ready for prime time yet. So I think, do you have any mobile app right now, or you're just, okay. So there is a technique, if you already have a mobile app, to start introducing React Native into it for certain views, which is actually the way Instagram works. Some Instagram views are just native views, others are React Native views. I would say right now that I would pay attention to that project and see if you can start reusing some of that code you've already written.
Okay, because so I understand right now there is no good solution to have one code base, right?
For web and mobile, yeah, I would say it's difficult, but people are working very hard on it. I follow the project and I know that there's a lot of commits happening every day. So.